Well, welcome, Emma, to the Finding Elevation podcast. I'm super excited to chat and to regroup. Congrats, first of all, on being the youngest American woman to complete
Thank
the
you
seven
so much.
summits and climb Everest. So you're 17 and you've been working with Alpine Athletics for 2 years in preparation for this goal. So since you were 15. And I often tell people, I look back to when I was your age and I think my biggest aspiration was like to kiss a boy. So like is a testament to you and your just motivation and resilience to have completed this goal. So we'll talk about all of that. I love starting with the origin for people, like how you got where you are today. And I know a little bit of this story, but when did Everest and the seven summits, when did those projects pop up on your radar? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it's kind of a random story, but I live in Bozeman, Montana, which pretty outdoorsy place. I've grown up skiing my whole life and in the outdoors, but was not a fan of hiking actually, which is pretty funny. I like to do whatever I do intensely, which I know now, but at the time I just thought like, oh, hiking's boring because you go up and then you go down. And I was just like, that seems really pointless. That's how everything was until 8th grade. I took an English class. I was just in a normal English class and we did a unit on Mount Everest. So random. We watched a documentary on Everest along with reading 2 books. We read Into Thin Air and then we read The Climb. Really watching the documentary was what kind of changed things, as I remember watching this person go on a ladder over the icefall and being like, that looks so cool. And then I look over and my friends are like terrified. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I went home and I was telling my dad about this really cool unit we were doing and how awesome it would be to do something like that. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And we were like, okay, let's go to Everest Base Camp. And so the next day, we tell my mom, and she's like, 100% let's go. And so the next day, we book a trip for maybe like a month later
Oh
that
my
we were
gosh.
going to go to Everest Base Camp for, I don't know, 2 weeks. I was going to leave school and just like go do this thing. So really spur of the moment, but it had been on my mom's bucket list for a while. So
Okay.
me saying that I wanted to do it was, I think, exciting for them. And then we went and it was really hard and it was kind of a life-changing trip. But I remember afterwards being excited to leave and being excited to go back to my normal life and not do hard stuff. And I got home and I was like, well, this is weird because I kind of missed that. And that was hard. And
Mm.
I'm not supposed to like hard things. Like, it was hard. And then that was when I figured out that I enjoy challenges. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll explore this a little more. So that was when my dad and I got connected with Lisa, and we decided to go to Bolivia and do a little mountaineering prep course. And this is funny because I only realized this recently because someone pointed it out to me. But in Bolivia, we were supposed to summit 3 mountains. We were 100% physically capable of doing that, but we knew nothing. And so we didn't summit a single mountain. And somehow we came away from that being like, yep, let's do it. Let's do the 7 summits.
It's funny
Um,
how different people, the calculations that go on in different people's minds.
yeah,
I
because for me, that was just the logical next step.
Right. And many people would have said, oh, this is not for me. I came here to summit. I didn't summit. Like moving on to the next thing. I was recently talking to someone about publishing my book and getting rejected by multiple publishers and how I just kept like moving on to the next one or finding a different way. I think that's grit. You and I have talked a lot about grit. But I
Yeah.
think that ability to like have a goal and take the process as input that allows you to further refine how you get to your goal, as opposed to saying, oh, it didn't work out exactly like I thought it should. Therefore, I'm just going to throw in the towel. That's something that can be honed. But I also think some people just have a little seed of that in them from the beginning, and some people just don't.
Yeah, I remember coming home from that trip and like telling my brother and saying that we were going to do the 7 summits. And my brother was like, are you sure? Like, you just didn't summit 3 consecutive mountains. And I was like, no, don't worry. Because the funny thing is that I learned so much from that trip. And I
Exactly right.
remember coming back and doing our debrief Zoom with you, and
Mhm.
just it must have been really long because we learned so much from like messing so many things up.
But that's how you learn. And that's how, we all started there. Every single person, every single mountaineer, every single skydiver, every single teacher started not knowing anything. And it's having that focus, I think, and resilience and the right people around you to keep you motivated and moving forward towards your goal.
And I think at the time it probably felt like not very good, but like looking back, I appreciate that experience so much.
Absolutely. I'm
Mhm.
curious, did you ever go back to that English teacher and say that how much that project changed your life?
I really wanted to reach out for a while and then I just kept forgetting. And then she follows me on Instagram. And so she saw me, like a bunch of
Right.
people posting about me and me posting about me. And I think she reposted me on her Instagram and said, like, how crazy it was that that is what
Yeah.
resulted from. So then I reached out to her afterwards and was like, thank you so much. Like, that really did change my life, even though it, like, was just a random unit that you decided.
Right. It's
So,
interesting. It's also just highlights how important teachers are in our lives and how things that may not seem that consequential really can be and can change the trajectory of especially a kid's life.
and I remember we did some activity in that English class of like the 7 summits, and like each group had a different one. And I really wanted Kilimanjaro because that was the one that my dad had done and my mom. But I got Denali and I was like, oh, that's kind of boring.
Well, of the 7 summits, just of your time as a mountaineer, aside from that Bolivia trip, are there other experiences that really stood out for you that were like pivotal or where you really felt like I learned a lot or propelled you forward?
I think Denali was a really big experience for me
Yeah.
because it was the third of the 7 summits that we did. And it was such a big step, I felt like,
Hmm.
because before that we did Kosciuszko and then we did Kilimanjaro. And so going from Kilimanjaro to Denali is like a very big
Big
step.
jump.
And we went to Ecuador and did like a Denali training course beforehand, but it still felt like it was like this is serious. It was the first like big, I mean, Killy's big, but it
Denali
was,
is a different kind of big, though. Yeah.
yeah, the first like real serious mountain that I'd ever done. It was such a big step. And I remember on Denali thinking every day, like, this was the hardest day of my life. And then the next day would happen, and I'd be like, well, this was the hardest day of my life. And that was a crazy experience because every day I kept proving to myself that, like, well, that was the hardest day of my life, but I got here and
Yep.
it's over, and tomorrow will be the same. And it was crazy because I had more weight than my body weight.
Now, let's just say that again. You were carrying more weight than you physically weigh, carrying and pulling in a sled.
Which is crazy. And I remember thinking, well, so happy that I am 4'11. And, but I mean, something that's really stuck with me from that climb was arriving to camp and to just one of the camps, and my guide telling me, like, wow, like, you're an animal. I have seen men twice your size struggle with that. And for me, that was just crazy because I was like, wow, that I'm here and I did it and it worked.
And we've talked about internal motivation, but that external motivation can mean a lot as well. And I imagine that moment when your guide turned around and said that to you really solidified a lot of things for you.
Oh yeah, especially because as like a young girl in mountaineering where there are not very many women, let alone young
Young
women,
girls, yes.
I think especially at the beginning, a lot of other people would look at me and assume that I would be kind of the weak link
Right.
and the person holding other people back. And maybe I thought that about myself too. I was like, well, I have a disadvantage, or not necessarily a disadvantage, but I am not as, like, you don't see a lot of people like me in mountaineering.
Correct.
So I think Denali was really the first time where I was like proving other people wrong, but also myself, and showing myself that I was really capable of doing things that I
Yeah.
hadn't seen other people do before. So it was a really big moment because Once I was able to do Denali, I was so much more confident in myself and in my abilities because I was like, oh, well, I've done Denali. But beforehand, it was really difficult because I was just a young girl saying that I was going to do this really crazy thing.
Right.
And people were like, okay, sure.
So a couple of questions about that. How did that show up for you? Like, did you just take that confidence with you? Did it make you feel more certain about climbing other big mountains? Like, how did that translate for you?
I think it gave me a little too much confidence because I was like, well, Denali, some people say Denali is harder than Everest.
Yeah.
So if I've
Yeah.
done Denali, well, I really can do anything. Which, I do believe that anyone can do anything. But I go to Aconcagua a few months later, totally confident, like, well, this is gonna be a breeze because I just did Denali. And what I realized after that trip is just because you've already done a really hard thing doesn't make everything else easier. It just means that you can also do another hard thing.
Yes. I think that's a really good point, Emma. It doesn't mean that things are going to be easy in the future. It just means that you're capable of doing hard things.
And I really realized that on Aconcagua because Aconcagua was one of the hardest mountains for me. And so was Denali, but in a really different way. Denali was one of my favorite mountains.
Yeah.
Everest and Denali were my favorites. And so I was just having a great time. It was super fun. And every day I was like working really hard and getting that right back in return.
Mhm.
Like I'd
Mhm.
work hard and I would succeed. And
Mhm.
that's how it worked on our trip. We had great weather. Like it was perfect. On Aconcagua, it really wasn't that way. I got really bad blisters right at the start, and
Yeah.
then our weather was really bad because we had to fit it in with my school because I go to school. And so I had to do Aconcagua and Vinson back to back in order to just like fit it in with my school schedule and
Mhm.
miss the least amount of school possible. So we went really early in the Aconcagua season. And so it was super windy and really bad weather. And so we were working hard, and then we were hearing, oh, well, you may not be able to summit because the weather might be bad. And we were hearing that every day for 2 weeks. And we summited on our last possible day, and it was the first day that anyone had summited that season. So
And there was just a tiny little sliver of good weather. It wasn't like you had this whole day where the weather was great.
yeah. And that summit day, too, I think was probably my hardest summit day. It started off really good and then I got tired. But yeah, so Aconcagua was a really difficult challenge for me in a different way. Denali physically was super difficult, but then Aconcagua was really mentally and kind of emotionally challenging because it's hard when you hear you've worked really hard and you're not going to be able to achieve something because you of something you can't control. And so that was difficult to be able to hear that I wouldn't even be able to try. I think that would have been, if it didn't work out, that would have been harder than trying and it not working out. So that was really difficult. And I do this whole thing with my dad. And so, of course, he wants it to all work out. And so that was hard on him as well.
How did you stay motivated, like in those moments where you're like, the weather's bad again?
In a lot of my interviews, I get asked, like, what was one moment that was really hard? And I never have an answer to that question because for me, it's always been I said I was going to do it and I just am going to do it. That's just kind of how it worked. And I never understood, like, there were a few times on Everest where people in my team were like considering going back or like these different things. And that just like really confused me because I was like, well, what do you mean? And not because, like, if I was ever in a dangerous situation, I would definitely
Sure.
turn around. But,
Yeah.
like, in terms of my motivation, it's always just been I said I was going to do it, so I am. For me to be able to summit these mountains, I have to be, I think, confident in myself, 100% sure that I can do it and that I'm going to summit. And of course, like, I very much could not have summited one of the 7 summits. We were really lucky with weather every time and everything worked out perfectly, but it might not have. But for me to be able to even go and try, I had to be in the mindset of like, I'm going to do
Gonna
this.
happen. Did you find that mindset waning when the weather was bad, or were you still just like, I'm gonna do this?
I remember that I was so focused on putting myself in the best possible position because one of the nights when we heard like the weather's really bad and it's not going to work out, I like had a headache and I wasn't feeling very good because we were at a really high altitude.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, this seems, even if we have an opportunity, like it's going to be really hard. And so I remember thinking that I needed to drink more water and to put myself in a better position, because if it's already going to be really hard with things I can't control, I need to just control the things I can.
You have learned lessons, Emma, that it takes many mountaineers decades to learn. But that's exactly right. Like, you cannot control the weather. It's going to do what it's going to do, but you can control your mindset and how prepared you are for the summit. And so instead of wasting energy stressing about the wind, use that energy to help yourself stay hydrated, rest, eat well, get your gear dialed. All those things are going to make you be in the best possible position you can be.
Yeah.
So, practical question, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with. You mentioned the blisters you got on Aconcagua. And blisters were sort of like that was a big thing that your mom was hugely helpful in sorting through, but like that was something that you fought with for a while on different climbs. What practical tips would you share with other people about
So
nagging blisters?
it's funny because I just did Everest a few months ago, or a month ago, and I got one blister the whole time.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. And then last week or 2 weeks ago, I went on a 3-day backpacking trip and probably got 10 blisters per foot. Yeah, so
You should have worn your 8,000-meter boots backpacking.
I know. I would love to say that I have figured it out and I have tons of tips, but I think, especially with something like blisters, it's so like dependent on tons of different factors. For me, I think heat is a really big thing. On Aconcagua, it starts off with the trek in the heat, and that's where I got those blisters, as well as on Vinson on the really hot days, I got blisters. And on Everest, it was hot some days, but not that kind of different level of heat. And on my backpacking trip, it was really hot. So I think for me, sometimes it's hard because I realized it's not completely in my control and it can just happen no matter what I do. On Everest, I was always trying to be really careful because it's such a long expedition that, like, if I'd gotten blisters at the beginning, yeah, maybe they would have healed, but like up there. And so I would say it really depends on the person. Find out what is a factor for you and try and eliminate that. A lot of times, like, I'll always get my boots a size bigger, and then I always kind of figure out if I want the boot to be tied loosely or if I want it to be tied tightly. I think it really depends on the person, and unfortunately, you have to do a lot of experimenting to figure it out. There's never actually a just like, this is the solution.
Yeah.
And here it is.
And you worked with a boot fitter, which I think is one important, if you're really plagued with tough feet issues or blisters, working with someone who can actually like see how you move in your shoes or your boots can be hugely helpful to craft insoles or even modify your boots in a way that accommodate your feet.
And something interesting with that is I think it's really important to work with, if you're doing outdoor hiking kind of things, to work with a outdoor boot specialist, because I went to just like a normal foot specialist and they told me, well, you walk normal and all this stuff is normal, and I was like, oh, okay, so I guess it's just like I just get a lot of blisters. And then I think probably like 5 days before I left for Everest, I was like, I really just gotta like go to some place that's gonna help me, because I was just worried. The blisters on Aconcagua and Vinson were pretty brutal, and that was very difficult for me. So I went to this outdoor shop called the Roundhouse in Bozeman.
Awesome.
And they are just like an outdoor clothes gear store that also does boot fits.
Awesome.
And I knew this because I always get my ski boots fit by them. And I was like, well, mountaineering boots are pretty similar.
Yeah, they are.
I went there actually before Denali as well, and they kind of widened the boot for me a bit, but we didn't do anything serious. But then right before Everest, I went and I learned that one of my feet pronates. but only in my mountaineering boots.
Oh, interesting.
So it's your feet walk differently and are different in different boots. And so I think going to an outdoor company that knows how
Yeah.
those kinds of boots work is really helpful. So then he made me custom insoles with just like a tiny bit of lift on one side, and it was a complete game changer. So it can be really tiny, tiny things, but
Absolutely.
it makes a big difference.
And I think part of that too is having a team of people to support you. So obviously, I enjoyed being on your team and your dad's team. Like, who else or what kinds of other people were helpful for you throughout this project?
Yeah, so we had a great team. My dad really made sure that I had a great team around me and people that I could look up to. He
Mhm.
also really made sure that I had a lot of women that I could look up to, which I really appreciated. Of course, we had you, which was the best.
Aw,
And then we also worked with a nutritionist at one point, Rebecca Dent,
Rebecca.
and she was super helpful. After Bolivia, I lost 15 pounds, which was a lot, especially for a small person. And so we worked with Rebecca to find nutrition plans that would work for me on the mountain, but also during training. And she really teaches you how to fuel your body correctly. And it's hard in mountaineering because you can't bring 5 liters of water with you. Like, that doesn't work. So
Yep.
she teaches us a lot about pre-hydrating and post-hydrating and all of these things. And so she was great. And it's nice because it's kind of like a 3-month around program where you work
Mhm.
with her, and then you can take that and you can apply it to the rest of it. So it's really nice because she kind of creates the foundation, and then you can go use it for all the other things you do,
Yep.
which was
She's
good.
really sharing knowledge that you can apply in multiple ways in your outdoor endeavors.
And then we worked with the Altitude Center in
Yeah.
London for a little while with the hypoxic tents. Great team. And then I had my dad. My dad's always on my team. So
I want to talk about him in a little bit. How did your friends or other people just in your sphere support you?
I have always been a little less outspoken about my mountaineering in like my day-to-day life, because like if I was in a going to my English class for the first time and they say like say a fun fact about you, I probably wouldn't say I'm a 3-time record holder and I just summited Everest. Like, that's
What
not
would you say? What would you say instead?
I have 3 dogs. Like, I would just say something random because I just don't. That's just how I
Yeah,
am.
I'm the same way. I'm laughing because I know that feeling. And I think that humility is really special. And then I think it actually makes your accomplishments more special because you're not just constantly talking about them with anyone who will listen.
And so my friends are very much different. And I like to let kind of my accomplishments speak for themselves. On one of my interviews recently, they said like, "Well, what would you like to like tell all those doubters?" And I was like, "I don't really want to tell them anything. Like, they can see for themselves what I've done. Take from that what you will." When I was training for Denali, we had to do the tire pulling,
Of course.
which was, as you know, not my favorite. Mostly just because I go to boarding school and I live on my campus and I live with a lot of other students and people I go to school with. And so I had to pull a tire for my training outdoors, obviously, around my high school campus, which was very not fun.
It's hard to be incognito when you're pulling a tire around campus.
Yeah, it's also hard when you do the Stairmaster for 4 hours with a giant backpack on. So I had some stuff like that, which was just like people would look at me and be like, "What is she doing?" I remember there was a lot of construction on our campus during our tire pulling days, and the construction workers would always come up to me and be like, "Do you need help?" And I was like, "No, I'm good."
Do they want to know why you're pulling a tire?
Probably. They were
They
probably like, "Is she trying to transport it?" Like,
you're trying to carry it somewhere.
I don't know what they thought. They were probably just very confused. Because, I mean, you'd see a normal person pulling a tire and you'd be like, okay, that's kind of weird, but I guess impressive. And then you see, like, small high school girl pulling one and you're like, what is she doing? So, my friends were very supportive because a lot of times I just, like, could not get myself to do the tire pulling unless I called my friends on the phone or had
Aw.
them walk with me. It's funny because I remember one of the times I was walking with one of my friends, pulling my tire, and a teacher came up to me and was like, "What are you doing?" And my friend immediately goes, "She's climbing Mount Everest." And I'm like, "Yeah." And the teacher's like, "Oh my God." And she's like, "Yep, she's setting 2 world records." And it's funny because I really appreciate my friends and my family for being excited about what I do and sharing that with other people. I'm on my family reunion vacation with my dad's whole family right now, and my little cousin, who's very cute, sent a video of me on the news to all of her friends.
Aw.
And they all respond like, "Oh, that's so cool." And then she says, "Now imagine if I told you that was my cousin." And they're
So
and so then
dramatic.
they're and so I have the best family, the most supportive friends, and I love that they're excited about what I do and that I get to share that with them. I actually brought a flag, a photo of all my friends on the summit, which was so fun. And a lot of times being up there, knowing that I have tons of people supporting me is
Yep.
really helpful because it can feel very isolating and you're in the middle of nowhere on a mountain with the same people.
Yep.
And they, of course, all support you, and my dad supports me. But it's really nice to know that I have people at home who are
Yeah.
supporting me.
And cheering you on for sure. So you climbed all these peaks with your father, Sam, which I think is just such a special experience to have for both of you. I know it wasn't always like perfect, but what did it mean to you to be able to do this with your dad? And I imagine that this answer is going to change over time, but how does it feel today?
It's so complicated because I think it's really different for both of us. When I was growing up, which I think has a big part to do with this, is how I was raised and
Mm-hmm.
the mindset that my parents instilled in me. But I remember my dad probably told me once a day for my whole life that you can do anything you set your mind to.
Aw.
And it's funny because now I get to do these interviews and do this fun stuff, and I tell people I think you can do anything you set your mind to, which is very funny how that works out because when I was younger, I'd roll my eyes and be like, "Oh, ever, Dad, if you say so." And he'd be like, "No, I'm serious." And he'd be like, "I can make my allergies go away if I just believe I don't have allergies." And personally, I don't think that's how it works. But I mean, he really tried to show us, my brother and I, when we were growing up, that it really is possible to do
Yeah.
anything you want. I think that a lot of things that my parents did kind of unconsciously, I inherited and I then went out to do. My mom as well is also like the coolest. She does tons of like trail running things. And so I think my parents showed me that, like, you can really just do whatever you want to do. And then doing it with my dad, I think that when you're on the mountains with a person, I think that you kind of connect in a different way that you just don't really connect with other people. And that's true about like the friends I made up there as well. But you kind of communicate with them in a really different way. My dad and I, like, when you're on the mountain, you're not like, oh, like just talking about random stuff. It's just like,
Right.
you don't complain as much and you don't like do all this stuff because you only talk about what matters. Like if it doesn't matter, then it's not important because you're in kind of a serious situation. I think he always trained a lot harder than I did. I mean, I trained hard,
Your
but
dad was one of those people that I knew if I told him to do an hour of something, he was going to do an hour and a half of it.
yep, which was for me very frustrating because I was like, well, now you're making me look bad. I was like, I complete the assignment and you go and write 5 paragraphs for a 1 paragraph essay, and that makes the rest of the class look bad. He was always doing that because he wanted to always be able to help me as well as just be prepared for anything that went wrong, which I always appreciated. I'm very independent, and I think that through this whole experience, I have possibly become more independent. And so I was always like, well, I don't want that. Like, I don't want him to do that for me. Like, I am able to do everything for myself. And it was that way on the mountain as well. Like, we have talked about this many times. he likes to tell me to put my hood on, or like put a pair of gloves on, or like, are you sure you're warm, Emma? Which for me is like probably the most frustrating thing ever, because I'm like, well, don't you think that if I wanted a hood on, I would probably put one on? Because he's just a caring parent. And like, while yes, he 100% believed that I was capable of doing this, like, we were on Everest or Aconcagua, like the tallest mountains. And so I think that he, of course, probably had some nerves
Yeah.
with me doing this, but more in that he was nervous about everything that he wanted to do to support me, less about whether I could achieve it or not, which I really appreciated. And I always appreciated knowing that, well, if no one else supports me, my dad does.
And that's an important distinction that you made, that it wasn't that he was worried about you or your capability. It was that he wanted to make sure he could be there for you. And
And
I
I think a lot of the times it felt like he was worried about me,
yeah,
which is why it was frustrating.
yeah.
And I encountered that a lot on the mountain too with other people as well. There were times where people would do different things with me. And I would be like, well, why are you doing that? I'm the same as everyone else. I am just as capable as everyone else. And so I think a lot of times I would overthink that a bit and read too far into things because I was worried that people thought I wasn't as capable. Really, really wanted to show other people. I mean, I always knew that I could do it, but it's different knowing that you can do something and actually doing it.
So I experienced something similar where people, sort of like the construction workers that wanted to help you carry your tire. It was on summit day. We had light packs and I was doing great, but the guide was like, I'll carry your pack for you. And I remember feeling like there is no way you're going to carry my backpack. Like, I'm fine. I'm not struggling. And after we summited, I, was full of vibrato probably and went into the tent and was like, hey, like, that wasn't cool for you to ask to do that. Like, I'm totally capable of doing it. And I feel like you were asking just because I'm the only girl on the team. And I could have approached that situation better, probably. And I understand that people are doing that because they want to help you and they want you to be as strong as possible and in the best position as possible. But I think what people don't often realize is that we, as women in a very male dominated environment, want to be seen equally as capable as everyone else on the team. And if we're given some sort of special support or a lighter load or something, then we don't feel like we're living up to that. And we don't feel like we're contributing to the team equally.
I think that's why for me on Denali, it was such a big thing because I really was carrying my weight and I really couldn't carry anymore. But I mean, yeah, it was hard for me, I think, knowing that people would look at me and have expectations and assumptions that weren't correct. I mean, I understand because, like, I would look at a 15-year-old and be like, you're climbing Everest, okay? And so I understand that, but it was really hard for me. And I think sometimes it led to unnecessary things that I did to go above and beyond on proving that I could do things.
Right.
And it got sometimes where, like, someone would give me a compliment and I would be like, okay, well, they're just saying that because I'm a girl or because I'm smaller than everyone else. There was this one point where a bunch of guides came and told me how strong I was and how great I was doing. And I was so upset. And I went and I called my mom and I was like, they're just saying that because they thought I was going to be really weak. And that was really hard for me because then turned into kind of a perfectionism kind of thing where I always thought I was like, okay, well, I have to do everything right. And I always have to be either on the same level as everyone else or doing better than everyone else, which, like,
Right.
you can't be doing better than everyone else on these mountains. You're all doing the same thing. But I would be like, I'm going to go at the front of the line and I'm going to be right in front. Not that that means anything. And I always thought, like, okay, if I'm making a mistake, it's okay as long as other people are also making that mistake. But I was like, okay, I can't be struggling or have something go wrong at a time when no one else is struggling.
Right.
Probably.
A lot of pressure. And I think most women in mountaineering have felt that pressure, which is self-inflicted. As
Yeah.
you pointed out, no one else has those expectations of you. But nonetheless, it's a very real and I think sort of natural feeling for women or people who are doubted. on expeditions.
And it's interesting because I had a call with Lucy Westlake, you
She's
introduced me
great.
to,
Yes. Love Lucy.
who's wonderful. And I remember asking her about this and saying, like, what do you do to stop from having people make those assumptions? And she
Yep.
told me, well, you really just have to prove them wrong. And I was like, and that's just the answer. And that's kind of how it goes. You just have to prove them wrong. And I think for me, that was always really hard to hear because I was like, well, I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to prove them wrong. They should just, yeah.
I
But
think it's proving them wrong for yourself. It's proving them wrong by doing what you love in the way that you know you can do it. And whatever they think is what they're going to think.
and I think also it can be fun, and it can be like,
For
well,
sure.
at one point on the mountain, which was one of my happiest memories, was because I'm really short and I am very aware of the fact that I am short while I'm climbing, because I'm like, wow, this would be a lot easier if I had longer legs. And well, I could step across this crevasse if I had
Yep.
legs, but here I am jumping. And so I was always very aware of, like, I'm short and that is a disadvantage and it is harder, but like I would never say that because,
Right.
again, like, I don't want to be saying, like, oh, well, like, it's harder for me than it is for you. Like, I don't need to say that. And everyone has their thing and everyone struggles with things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would never really point that out. But there were points where people were like, well, I was going over the crevasse and I was like, how did Emma do that? And at one point, one of my really good friends told me, he was like, well, when I go through the ice fall, I was like, well, Emma just did this. And if Emma just like went up this slope, then I definitely can go up this slope as well.
Right.
And that for me was just so nice to hear, that like I personally love to like say that I like to inspire young girls and I want to show them that they can dream big. But it was really cool for me to have like my grown friend tell me that I inspired him. That was really a cool moment.
And I think it's when you're focused on doing something for you and not for how it looks externally that inspiration happens, because it's authentic and you're there for the right reasons, showing up in a humble, supportive way. And I love that you are using your accomplishment, to inspire other young girls and young women. What do you say to them, especially if they're listening to this and they're like, I don't know anything about Everest, or there's no way my parents would let me do whatever it is that they want to do. So maybe they don't have the support that you did. What would you say
Yeah.
to them?
I think, find your Everest. It doesn't have to be Everest. And just dream so big.
Yeah.
Just like say the craziest things and then just back them up. Just like prove people wrong, I guess. I really just think like dream big. Just whatever you want to do, and you can do it as long as you are confident in yourself and as long as you put in the hard work. Especially, I think hard work is very important. I think that like you can be talented at something, but if you don't work hard, like you're just not going to get anywhere with it. You can be not talented at something and work really hard
Totally.
and do crazy things. And so I really think dream big, be confident in yourself, and don't listen to what other people say. If they're doubting you, like just prove them wrong and don't even say anything to them. Just show them what you've done. And that's one of my favorite things, is like I don't want to go to the people who have doubted me and be like, oh yeah, well, like I just did this, because that's just not who I am. Like I don't like to tell normal people about it either.
Totally.
I like for it to just speak for itself, and I think
Yep.
it really does. And so claim that you're going to do crazy things and then just do them. Yeah.
Well, it definitely speaks for your accomplished, definitely speaks for themselves. Anything else that you want to share with people?
I think I just thought of something else.
Yeah, go for it.
Also, don't let fear get in your way. And I think
Yes.
that's a big thing that I didn't learn until Everest, actually. As you know, I love all the crazy stuff and all the typically scary things. And that's what I've always looked forward to most. And that's pretty clear based on the story of why I got into this. I watched someone crossing the ice fall. And so I think that I was always really excited for the scary things because they weren't scary to me, they were exciting. And it wasn't until Everest where I was actually scared. And I remember it was the night we went through the ice fall for the first time, or the night before we went through. And I remember thinking, I was nervous, and I was like, okay, I'm nervous, that's normal. And I was like, this is kind of weird though. Like, this is kind of a different level of nervous. And I was like, what is this? And I was really confused. And I was like, I think I'm scared. And I was like, well, that's really weird because I don't normally get scared. And it wasn't something that I was exactly prepared for because it's not something I think about. I think that I use my fear in a different way and I channel it differently. Where for me, fear is something that's really exciting. And I see that as excitement, not fear. And so this was the first time where I really recognized, like, okay, this is fear. And that was a crazy moment for me because I was like, well, what do I do? Like, I was like, what do people do when they're scared? Because of course I'm scared in day-to-day life or not day-to-day life, but like I have things that are scary or nerve-wracking, like when I go to take a test. Like, I don't like taking tests. Those are hard, and they can be scary. And so it wasn't exactly that I didn't know what to do. It was more that, like, I never had that feeling associated with mountaineering. And so I was just like very confused and a little lost. And I went to my friend, and it's something I'll never forget because it has really changed so much for me. I was really nervous, and I was like, well, I can't call my mom. What am I going to tell her? Hey, mom,
I'm
super
afraid.
nervous. I'm scared I'm going to get crushed by an avalanche. So, what do you think about that? Like, that's not going to work. So, and then I was like, well, I can't call my friends. Like, they don't even know what the ice fall is. I would text them and be like, hey, I'm going through the ice fall tonight. And they'd be like, okay, great. And they were like, I don't know what that is, but, and so, like, that's not their fault. And it's not my mom's fault either. Like, just, I couldn't do that. And so I went to my friends on the mountain, and my one friend sent me this quote. And he said to me that if it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be big enough.
I love
And
that.
me too. And that for me just resonates so much. And I was just like, wow, that's really true. And so every time I was really scared on the ice fall, I'd repeat it back to me and say, okay, well, if it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be big enough. And it sounds nice now, but at the time I was like, if it wasn't scary,
It's too
I'd
big.
hear an avalanche and be like, just focus. That quote for me was really, really impactful for mountaineering. But I think that also, like, you can apply it to your life and to anything. I think if you're not challenging yourself to a point where you're scared, then, like, you can do more and you can challenge yourself more. Of course, all the other mountains were challenging for me, even though I wasn't very scared, but you can accomplish things that you wouldn't have ever dreamed of or expected that you could do if you do something a little scary.
I love
And, I
that.
think that was a lot scary, but
Well, that's
but
where we grow, right? When we stay in our comfort zone, we're not pushing ourselves and we're not growing and we're not expanding. We have to get to that edge of scary and struggle, but exciting because of what's on the other side of that. And that's when we push ourselves, and that's when we figure out what we're capable of and grow.
And I think that you can use your fear and kind of change it and translate it into excitement. But other times, like, you can just be terrified. I know I was at certain points, and it worked out. And the ice fall was my favorite part of the expedition. The 2 days where I was the most scared were the most life-changing and impactful days, as well as my favorite days, actually. Yep. The first night I went through the ice fall, terrifying, but so fun. And I got halfway through and the sun finally rose, and I was like, this is pretty
amazing. It's scary and dangerous, but it is just remarkable to be in the ice fall. And, like, I felt the most connected to Mount Everest when I was in the ice fall.
And then my other scariest day was, of course, the summit. And there were other scary things, like, of course, I was scared I wasn't going to summit. I was scared, like, of all the what ifs. But, of course, that was one of the most fun days and exciting days.
Tell me a little bit more about what was scary for you on the summit.
I think fear of failure, of course,
Okay.
but also at that point, I had gotten so far that that was a lot less of a factor for me. I think on every other summit, that has been a lot bigger. As you know, I have messed some things up and just done some stupid mistakes in the past on summit nights just because of that fear. But this summit night, it was really weird because even a few days before, I normally get nervous. And
Mhm.
on this one, nothing. And then the night before, nothing. And I was like, okay, this is weird. Like, what's happening? And I think for me it was kind of two different things. Partially because the whole thing felt like a dream to me. So I was like, it was something I was looking forward to, and it was the day and night that I was looking forward to for 2 years.
And you had
And so when
visualized it and thought about it and meditated and
yeah.
all of it.
So when it was actually happening, it was weird to me because I was like, it was just weird. I was like, well, this is the day. Here it is. I'm on the summit. Here I am. So that was kind of weird. And I was like, felt like I was dreaming, and it was very surreal. And so that was part of why I wasn't as nervous. And the other part was I don't think I've ever been so prepared for a summit
Right.
than when I had my Everest summit. The month of acclimatization alone, but also 2 years of training and intense training too.
Yeah.
But I had done 6 other summits before, and none of them were perfect. And I mean, they all worked out, but
Mhm.
also none of them were perfect, and they were hard, and unexpected things happen. And I think going up to this one, I just felt like there was nothing that could happen that I wasn't prepared for. And I remember on the summit thinking this as well, or like while we were going up. I think for me, there were moments where I was like, whoa, like I should check in with myself. Like, am I sure that I'm okay? Because there are other people and things around you that you notice that are
Mhm.
that make you
Mhm.
feel that way.
Mhm.
And I remember we were right below the Hillary step, and once you get to the Hillary step, definitely gonna make it. And I had heard that, of course, many times, and I was pretty confident I was gonna make it the whole time, but it feels more real when the sun is rising and you're on the Hillary
Yeah.
step. And I think at that point, I saw some things that were scary, and I was like, okay, well, I should check in with myself, make sure I'm okay. And it's like, I feel fine. Like, I feel great. And I'm totally fine. And I remember thinking, like, a lot of times the accidents that happen are if you put yourself in a position that you're not prepared for. And I remember just feeling very prepared.
Love that.
And there were things that happened that were very frustrating. And after our summit, I, of course, was very happy that I summited, but I was also a little frustrated with myself that it didn't go perfectly, which makes no sense. But like, there were little things that happened. Like, I started off too warm, like, too many layers on, and like pulled the liner out of the guide glove and couldn't get my fingers back in, which was really hard because I'm stuck with 3 fingers on the Jumar for the whole summit night because this happened right at the beginning. So there were random things that I could have done better, but in all, like, they went fine. And like, yeah, there were things I went that could have gone better, but I made a change and it was fine. And I remember that's how I felt before the summit, is that it's all gonna be okay because I said I was gonna do it, so I just am.
So it was that determination and focus, I think, coupled with what you said, preparation, right? It was a combination of those two things that made you feel just ready for the summit. You weren't, it makes sense to me that you weren't afraid because you knew that you'd done everything you needed to be ready.
And there were things that scared me up there, but I wasn't ever like scared for myself. I was scared for other people, but it was a very special moment.
Thank you for sharing it with us. It has been really a pleasure to help you and your dad. It was more than coaching, it was really helping you become mountaineers, which at the beginning I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But you are both so just focused and dedicated to doing the work and curious about learning. And you really did over these past 2 years become mountaineers. And I'm very happy and proud to be a part of that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, of course. I was so excited for this podcast because it's fun that I get to share my accomplishments with like a lot of people who helped me along the way. And when I think of like number one person who helped me, I have to say my dad. But
Of course.
when I think of like the next person, it's 100% you. And I really could not, I mean, find another coach maybe, but like I would not have ever felt as prepared as I did than like when I worked.
Well,
and
thank you for
we
saying.
spent so much time like going through every step of the mountain and like all the things I was nervous for. And because I was always more nervous before the mountains, and you would always do everything to make sure that I felt good. And
Well,
it was great. And I've been looking forward to this podcast because I was like, I'm so excited to talk about what I did and show that you're the best.
thanks, Emma. That's very sweet of you to say. I know your primary goal now is to finish high school, and I sort of hate it when people ask me what is next, so I'm not going to ask you that. But I know you have some big plans, and I'm just really looking forward to see what happens next and how you continue to inspire and motivate people with your actions.
Thank you. I really couldn't have done it without you.
My pleasure.